for our presentation today. If you are joining us, thank you so much for taking the time out to view this presentation. You are watching today for free via our YouTube link, so be sure to type any questions that you have into the YouTube chat bar, and we'll be answering those in the middle of the presentation, and we'll also be taking some Q&A at the end of today's webinar with our presenter. So make sure you type your question in there. Once again, you're watching today for free, so if you would like to receive CECs for today's presentation and get your continuing education, make sure to use the link provided on the screen. That's acefitness.org/past-webinars. A recorded version of this webinar will be available in the next 24 to 48 hours at that link, and when you purchase, you'll receive the recorded version in your MyAce account. Once you pass the quiz, you'll receive 0.1 CECs within your MyAce account. Okay, if you're ready to get started, let's move on to today's presentation. Welcome to your course, Coaching Clients with Chronic Pain, Relief from the Inside Out. My name is Jackie Crockford, and I will be your host. And joining me today is our presenter, Kevin Murray. Hi, Kevin.
Hi.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. So, Kevin, you're joining us from Canada.
That's correct.
Thank you for coming all this way.
Yes.
And we have a lot of people that are joining us as well live today from different areas. So make sure and type that in if you're joining us from other areas of the country. So, Kevin, you're talking with us today about working with clients who have chronic pain.
Yep.
And tell us just first a little bit about how you got started with those types of clients.
Yeah, good question. You know, perhaps many of our viewers, when I first started out, I would work with almost any client that would come and see me, I would work with them. But what I noticed quickly was they all have their own goals that they want to work towards, but there were limitations, whether they be movement limitations or previous injuries or current injuries, to the point where we were spending more time focusing on that than working towards their goals. So I spent many years going down a deep rabbit hole of understanding biomechanics and anatomy and motor learning and motor control and all those areas. But then when I really started to focus on the chronic pain clientele, what I noticed is, yeah, there's movement limitations to consider, but that's just part of it. There's areas that are affected in their life that lie outside of movement. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Great. So probably many people that are watching today, many of your clients have chronic pain as it is something that's pretty prevalent, right, in our society today.
Yes.
So we're going to be addressing a few different learning objectives for today's course. Talk to us about what we're going to be learning today.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about pain, but the brain's role in pain. And recognizing that every single client that comes in has their own story. They have a story of what their life was like before pain entered and how their life is different now that pain is there. So recognizing that everyone comes in with a story and seeking to understand that story. We're going to talk a bit about the three-dimensional nature that a chronic pain experience embodies. Yes, there are biomechanical and anatomical components, but that's just part of the equation. We're going to talk about how we can, go about facilitating an increase in our clients' awareness of their situation. So, they're not so focused on, the fear that often accompanies pain. And perhaps maybe we can shift their focus towards, something that they can move towards. And lastly, we're going to talk about how education, language, metaphors, and questions act as an interdependent system that allow us to help blueprint what our client's end in mind is. What is meaningful to them? Because that's what's most important.
Great. So that last point that you just made, we're going to be learning about that a little bit later, and those 4 components come from a course that we now have with you, the Yellow Brick Road.
That's right.
So we'll be referencing that just a little bit, and we'll talk more, and we'll share with you more about the Yellow Brick Road and how you can learn more information if you're interested in this conversation that we're having today. But let's first start with kind of this big picture, right? We have clients with chronic pain. They're coming to us. We want to help them. That's our job, right? So how do we, from kind of a big picture perspective, understand where they're at, with their chronic pain?
Yeah, so, as movement professionals, what we're well versed in is the movement side of working with individuals, particularly, individuals with pain. But, you referenced the yellow brick road and the coaching side of working with people in pain. How are we with our conversations with our clients in pain? And is it possible that we can do it better? And the conversations that we have lie predominantly outside of the biomechanical realm, in the psychological and social realm. So that's the big picture that we're going to be talking about.
Great. So part of that big picture is, as you mentioned a little bit earlier, understanding where our clients are, seeking first to understand.
Yes.
So what does that mean when we're talking about chronic pain?
Yeah, that's a great point. Seeking first to understand is borrowed from one of the classics, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, written by Stephen Covey. And that's habit number 5, which is seek first to understand. And that's what we want to do with our clients. We want to seek to enter their world so we can understand it, so that at some point then we can be understood. And I'll share with you an example of an individual who did a really great job of seeking to understand, and then someone who missed an opportunity, just so we can get some clarity around it. So I'll never forget, this is years ago. I was working out at the gym, and I was walking by. When you walk by, people, you get 3 to 5 second snippets of the conversation that they had. And this was the conversation. It was a first-time trainer, a trainer meeting a client for the first time. And this was the conversation. It was, "Hi, nice to meet you. How are you?" This is the trainer asked the client. The client responded by saying, "Actually, I'm a little bit nervous today." And the trainer said, "Oh, don't worry, there's nothing to be nervous about." So contrast that to this example right here. I was actually at my ophthalmologist's office. And I went from, the big waiting room, and they call your name and you get really excited, and then you go to a smaller waiting room, and then you finally end up in the room by yourself. And I could hear my ophthalmologist's voice, and I thought he was going to enter my room, but he knocked on the door and he was going to the room across. But I heard the conversation. So he knocked on the door and he said, "Hi, nice to meet you. How are you?" And it was almost exactly the same. The client that I couldn't see but I could hear said, "You know what, doc, I'm actually a little bit nervous." And the doctor said, "Oh, really? What about?" So think about the difference. So in that response, in that curiosity, "Oh, really, what about?" he provided an opportunity for the client to dive deeper and peel back layers of the story. Whereas over here, it was very well-intentioned. Say, "Oh, don't worry, there's nothing to be nervous about." But there was an opportunity missed to seek to understand that client's story.
Right. So when we are trying to seek to understand, what we're looking for sometimes as maybe movement professionals or personal trainers is something around the physical body,
Yes.
right? But there's also, we want to be seeking to understand something a little bit deeper too, right?
Exactly. So, when we say seek first to understand in our context, every client that comes and sees us, they're unique. We know that. But every client in pain comes in with what we call 2 global problems. And the first problem is the external problem. And this is kind of like the check engine light that comes on in your car. It lets you know that something's off, but it doesn't really give much detail into it. And the external problem are the anatomical and biomechanical aspects of a client's story that they give utterance to, that they share with us. That's the external problem. But on the other side is the internal problem. And this is, thinking back to the check engine light, this is when we pop the hood and look for the specifics. So this lies underneath the surface in the psychosocial realm. So it's outside of the biomechanical realm. I'll share an example with you of a client. I'll never forget this individual. Several years ago, came to see me, and he had enormous back pain, but he was, really outgoing. He had a high energy to him. He was, gregarious, loquacious. He was just an outgoing guy. And, we sat down, and after the initial pleasantries, we started peeling back layers of the story, and I asked him a question. And I asked him this question: I said, what have you specifically missed out on because of your pain? And you could feel the energy in the room change. You know, the smile on his face, you know, faded, and it felt heavy. And, you know, tears started to well up in his eyes, and his jaw started to shake, and his voice quivered as he answered, you know, I wasn't able to ask my daughter to dance at her high school graduation. And, you know, for any parents out there watching, you know, that's heavy. You know, there's meaning in that he wasn't able to ask his daughter to dance, and that's really what he wanted to do. So in that, he just revealed his internal problem. And how we define the internal problem is the areas in life that hold the most meaning to an individual that have been negatively impacted by chronic pain. So again, it's the areas in life outside of the biomechanical realm and anatomical realm that hold the most meaning, so it's subjective, that have been negatively impacted by chronic pain. And just for our viewers, we'll put up you know, the definition, our definition of the external problem, which is the biomechanical and anatomical aspects which clients give reference to or give utterance towards.
Great. So you're meeting with this client who has clearly had some issues with chronic pain and is trying to work towards that. It's affected him in his relationships at this point. And so let's talk about how that biopsychosocial aspect of chronic pain can be something that we can address with our clients.
Yeah, so you know, the biopsychosocial model is it's nothing new, although it's really been talked about a lot as of late. From 1977, George Engel, who was a psychiatrist, he recognized that there needed to be a different way to look at the biomedical model. And what he was able to put forth is that every individual, every experience has biological, psychological, and social components or factors that we want to consider. And especially, you know, within the chronic pain context, what are the biological or biomechanical, psychological, and social components to a pain experience?
Great. So on this next slide, you can see that we have kind of a soup, if you will, of all of these different aspects that are something to maybe take into account. So let's talk about a few of these and just understand how, as professionals, maybe this is something that we can look into.
Yeah, and that's a great metaphor. It's a metaphor that we use with our clients often. You know, gone are the days where, you know, we look at clients in pain purely from a biomechanical or anatomical component. You know, that it's still a part of it. Let's make sure that we give, like, it's still an important component, but it's just part of the equation. So, you know, we, you know, look at this soup as having ingredients. So an individual's pain experience has biological or biomechanical, psychological, and social or environmental ingredients. So biomechanical constraints are one of the ingredients we want to consider. But also, what are the client's perceptions of their current reality? What is their understanding or beliefs about pain? Are they fearful or avoiding any particular movements? You know, if we rush too soon to the assessment component of working with people in pain, and let's say we're going to assess their overhead squat, but they're fearful of squats, you know, that's something that we want to know and we want to seek to understand. And then a huge one, which we'll touch on later, is meaning. You know, every individual experiencing pain is given meaning to that experience. So recognizing that, you know, within that internal problem lies a three-dimensional component that's involved in all pain experiences.
Okay, so when we talk about the biopsychosocial model, is there an example that you have, maybe a client that you've worked with that really kind of brings that to life? Yeah,
you know, the group of individuals that comes to mind are runners. And I know that you're a runner yourself, Jackie, so you might find this interesting. Runners are a very special breed of people. And what I mean by that is getting their runs in is incredibly important to them, to the point where even when pain is present, they'll very often just try to push through it. But if they're coming to see me, pain has gotten so loud that they're not doing their runs anymore. So let's say that they're experiencing knee pain. So there's a biomechanical component to that knee pain that's preventing them from running. But think about this though. Let's say that that runner is part of a running group, and because they're not going for the runs, they're no longer able to partake in that after run coffee and conversation with their group. So no longer are they getting that psychological stimulation from that social context of going for coffee with the group. And obviously these lie outside of the biomechanical factors which contribute to pain. So having an understanding of that, and also recognizing that runners often hold an identity, right? Like, I am a runner, this is what I do. And when pain gets so loud that they can no longer go for the runs, some people call that an identity crisis. Just recognizing that, yes, biomechanics and anatomy are really important components, but there's 3 dimensions to it. And can we consider the psychological and environmental social components to it?
Okay, so now we'll move on. We've kind of understood a little bit,
Right.
seeking to understand our clients. And now we'll move on to a bit of the need psychology. And we have to remember that as health and fitness professionals, we are not psychologists, right?
Yes.
We are health and fitness professionals, so we have to stay within our scope of practice.
Yes,
but I
very
think
important.
this area is really important to understand what level of need is our client at and what do they value, right?
Yes. Really important, Jackie. If anybody has been in an undergraduate course in psychology, they will have heard of Abraham Maslow's needs hierarchy theory. And Abraham Maslow, this dates back all the way to the 40s. And what he put forth was the idea that human beings have needs, and we need to satisfy these needs. And they're universal, so they're not a Canadian thing, they're not an American thing, but they're universal needs. And it's still today one of the most 75, 80 years later, it's still one of the most referenced psychological theories of human behavior. And again, just pointing out that everybody has needs. And because it was so well received, there were multiple meta-theories that were added to it. And one of the ones on the slide is the 6 human needs. And again, it talks about the notion that human beings have universal needs. But beyond understanding these needs, it's recognizing how pain is preventing individuals from meeting their needs. So let's use the example of a runner. We could spend an hour just talking about these 2 theories, but I'm going to talk about the ones that are absolutely parallel in both theories, and that's the need for connection and belonging and love. So think about the runner. They have a sense of belonging and connection to that running group. And now, because of pain, because of that knee pain, the vehicle that they have chosen, the vehicle as a metaphor that they've chosen to meet that need is running, and they can no longer run. They're no longer meeting that need anymore. So recognizing that we all have needs and we value we value them differently. So understanding that there's needs, but how is chronic pain preventing that individual from meeting those needs is what's most important.
So this actually goes back to that client that you mentioned earlier with their daughter,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And he had a need for connection and time
Exactly.
with his family member, right?
Exactly.
So how do we, when talking with clients that are going through that, and we're now seeking to understand that that's what's happening, how do we as fitness professionals kind of navigate this and maybe help them rewrite the script of that pain experience?
Yeah, that's such a great phrase, script, recognizing that everybody comes in with a story, and just using that example of the individual, my client, not being able to dance with his daughter. Clearly, this man values connection and love and belonging with his daughter. It was beyond back pain for him. right? Yes, there's back pain, but he wasn't able to satisfy that need of connecting with his daughter through dancing. So he comes in with that story or that script. So, in seeking to, improve our capacity to have conversations with clients, we've come up with a metaphor of rewriting the script, which, can we, through a collaborative process with our clients, help them reauthor their script or their story so that they have something to move towards as opposed to trying to move away from something? Because when pain is present, you better believe that fear is often close by. Fear of pain getting worse, or fear of pain not getting better, or whatever it is. Fear is a cousin oftentimes. So can we shift our clients towards the future and towards possibilities?
Right. So that's kind of what we'll be moving into now is these possibilities paradigm that you talk about in the Yellow Brick Road, which is another course that we have with you. So let's walk through those 4 chapters of helping our clients develop this now possibility and looking towards the future rather than kind of being held captive by their pain, right?
Absolutely. That's a great way to put it. One of the primary components in a possibilities paradigm, which we call a possibilities paradigm, is can we enhance our clients' understanding of their pain experience so that they can expand the meaning that they've given to it or that they've labeled to it. One of the most influential books that I've ever read, all the textbooks, they do not compare to Viktor Frankl's book, A Man's Search for Meaning. And many of you might have heard of it or read it, but within that book, it states his story of being Jewish and a neurologist and psychiatrist. He was captured and spent time in the concentration camps in Auschwitz during World War II. And what he recognized was within that nightmare of a setting, of that experience, everybody was experiencing the same thing. They were all within the same concentration camp. But what he noticed was everybody was viewing that situation differently. Or said in another way, they were giving different meaning to their experience. And what he took from that is everything can be taken from you. Your watch, your clothes, everything can be taken from you, except what something means. So can we, collaboratively with our clients, enhance our clients' understanding of their experience so they can expand the meaning that they've given it? And we talk about 4 chapters that we often use with our clients. And again, chapters is a metaphor for understand that clients come to us with stories. So the first one that we're going to talk about is chapter 1, which we call education. And again, with the premise of focusing on enhancing our clients' understanding, what do our clients know about their pain experience? Do they understand what it means? Do they understand the functionality behind experiencing pain? What is pain? Why do we experience it? Can we as coaches go about educating them through story or through pedagogy? So, we don't want to preach to them, we don't want to put on a lecture, so that's why we want to focus on stories as a conduit for education. So an example that I often share with clients is the story of Bethany Hamilton. And Hollywood even made a movie about her. And years ago, she was 13 years old and she was an aspiring surfer, living in Hawaii, I think. And just on one day, not unlike any other day, out surfing, she was lying, perpendicular to the waves with her arm dangling. And she said that she just felt a couple tugs, but looked down and just saw blood everywhere. And what she realized was that a 14-foot tiger shark had just bitten her entire arm off. But what's really interesting about this story is that she was very calm, very lucid, very much in control, recognized what was going on, and calmly, referenced to her friend, hey, we need to get to the boat, there's a shark in the water, and it was slowly paddling and got to the boat and got to safety. But what she stated was that for the first several hours, she experienced zero pain. No pain. So she lost an entire appendage. Clearly there's tissue damage, and yet there was zero pain. And contrast that to a teeny tiny paper cut that I'm sure we can all remember having one at least once in our life, and how shockingly painful that can be, right? So how is it that a paper cut, which there's tissue damage, but compared to losing an arm, shockingly painful, and yet an individual references no pain? And just in sharing that story, very often you can see your client's brain just starting to process it and starting to expand their awareness about, and another metaphor that we often use is, pain acts as an alarm system for us, right? It captures our attention and lets us know that something's up and we need to attend to it. So can we use stories to enhance our clients' understanding of their experience so that they can expand their meaning? And one way is through education through story.
Great. So this education through story is for us as the
Yes.
health and fitness professional to kind of relay, help educate the client about what their story of chronic pain is meaning to them.
Yes.
And then we also want to talk to them, the next chapter that we're going to look at is about how we use language to do that.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more, because story is kind of part of the language, right? Education
Absolutely.
is part of the
Absolutely.
language. What do you specifically mean about language here?
Yeah, great question. So recognizing that, the language that we use just in general is a significant contributor to, it significantly influences and shapes our experience. So very often, if anybody's been working with people in pain for a while, you'll recognize that, clients, when they try to describe their pain experience, use top shelf descriptors. So, they might come in and be like, oh, my shoulder is in agony, or, this has been absolutely devastating, with huge emotional tones. So the words that they use are contributing to the intensity of their experience. And, if we can establish a relationship, that's founded upon trust and rapport, can we get to a point where, we're seeking to understand the language that they're using, but then because we recognize that it influences and shapes an individual's experience, can we help them reframe or use alternative words and language to describe their experience? And almost every single time a new client comes to see me, they'll use the word fix. They'll say that, my knee needs to be fixed, or you've got your task cut out for you because, you got to fix me. And while there might not be a lot of meaning in that to some people, we have to appreciate that there's a huge presupposition attached to the word fix, and that's that an individual is broken. And of course, we know that they're not broken, but they're still using that word. And, human beings are not a mechanistic instrument. You take your car to the mechanic and they fix it. So can we, through alternative suggestions, or what we call conscientious linguistics, can we offer up alternatives? And an example that I might use, if someone says, you got to fix my movement, I might say, I'm wondering, what would your thoughts be if we use the word enhance instead? How would that feel for you? So instead of fixing movement, just enhance your movement, or correct some minor movement stuff. You know what I mean? Just different words, offering alternatives. Which the volume knob, if the volume knob was at a 10 because of the words they use, can we turn it down just by suggesting a different word?
Great. So you use the metaphor turning the volume knob down.
Yep.
So let's talk now about the third chapter, which is metaphors, and using metaphors to, maybe the clients use metaphors with us, or maybe we can use metaphors with clients when talking about pain.
Yeah, absolutely. Both of them, because pain is so complex and, it's ambiguous, and it's difficult for clients to explain it to us. So, recognizing that it's difficult, metaphors is often a way in which clients talk to us about their pain experience. They might say something like, it feels like a knife is in my back, or it's a stabbing pain, or it's a burning sensation. These are symbols of meaning that compare two unlike identities. So, I'll share an example with you. A pain client drove 3 hours to see me. So right away I knew that I wasn't the first person that they've seen. But they took the time to drive up 3 hours. And after the initial, pleasantries of meeting this individual, she got really emotional very quickly. And she said to me, "Kevin, I've tried so many different keys, and I just haven't found the right one yet." And in my head, I leaned back and I went, "Oh, I get it. She's using a metaphor to describe her experience, that she's been unsuccessful in finding a solution." But can you imagine the psychological distress that an individual might carry around, thinking that there's only one key that's going to unlock their pain problems? So recognizing that she's using a metaphor, I wanted to enter her world, and I offered up one of my own. And I said, I'm not sure if this shoe fits, so if it doesn't, you can just kick it off. And by the way, there's a metaphor right there. So I provided her an opportunity to either accept it or say, no, I'm not going to roll with that. But this is what I said to her. I said, what if I said to you that we don't even need a key? And I paused for a second, and I could tell that this was a brand new thought to her, because she was communicating through metaphors of needing to find a key. And I said, what if I told you we're not even going to use a key, because we're going to go through that back window over there? And as you can imagine, she just sat there with that and played with it. But in offering up my own metaphor that related to hers, I could see that the meaning in her story was starting to change and expand. And that's the power that seeking to understand and using a metaphor can have with people in pain.
So using metaphors is one way that we can kind of build rapport and build connection with clients, right? And as you mentioned, that's kind of the basic foundation of this process of helping them to manage and maybe improve their pain situation. So another way, and this is the fourth chapter, that we can start to build this rapport with our clients is through the right questions.
Yes.
And we use the term in the Yellow Brick Road, reflexive questions, to start to do that. So let's talk more about how we can use reflexive questions.
Yeah, it's a tongue tie, right? Yeah. Reflexive questions, it's difficult. Recognizing that we as coaches, one of our primary tools that we can use with clients is questions. But recognizing that not all questions are created equal, and that there's different types of questions, closed-ended questions, open-ended questions, and that they have a different intention behind them. And invariably when I'm at a seminar or a workshop and we start talking about questions, I'll ask the audience, why do we even ask questions? And invariably someone says, to gather information. And while that is absolutely true, there's more to it. The utilitarian purpose behind questions is to give focus a specific direction. So reflexive questions in their nature are designed to bring forth possibilities. And possibilities are future-oriented, aren't they? So not only with asking those questions are we future-oriented, the design or the intention behind asking them is to, you could probably guess, enhance understanding so that we can expand meaning.
Great. So with these questions that we want to kind of help clients invoke this progression towards the future rather than leaning back into the past or kind of being stuck in this story that they've created, you have 4 questions that we're going to talk about, right? So these questions in their nature are intended to promote this forward thinking. Also, the first question that we're going to talk about really helps us understand the values that they have, right?
Very much clients. So. Yeah, so there's no foreground without a background. And sometimes even asking a question designed or with the intent in the background gives us insight into where we're going to go. So if you think, or the question that we have up here, what have you specifically missed out on because of pain? They need to go and think about that. They need to go into their head and start to think about what have they missed out on. But the answers reveal enormous amounts of important information. So if we think back to the client who didn't get an opportunity to dance with his daughter, and he shared that with us, that question also gave us insight into which needs he values most, right? Belonging and connection with his daughter, which obviously is beyond just experiencing back pain. So that's, in this example, and these don't have to go in a specific order, but this is, since we've already asked this question, what have you specifically missed out on because of pain, reveals so much of what an individual values.
Right. So when thinking about some other clients, and maybe we'll go back to the runner for a moment, what are some other answers that you've heard or other stories that people have said, oh, I just really missed that. That was the thing that was important to me.
If we think of runners, so often, the first response is I didn't get to go for my run. That's what I missed out on. But if we stay with it and they're willing to go deeper, what you find out is, that knee pain is preventing them from playing with their daughter or their son, their newborn. They're not able to get up and down and do what is normal to, or what once was normal to them. So again, it gives us insight into, that example. Yeah, that individual's experiencing knee pain and they can't go for their run, but what else have they missed out on? And the answers are most often in the psychological, social realm.
Right. So understanding how those three things play together, the bio part is there. We know that they can't go for their run, but what else from the social aspect or psychological aspect is going on?
Exactly.
Great.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the next question, and you can see it on your slide that you might want to discuss with a client. And as you mentioned, you wouldn't necessarily want to ask these in any particular order. But something that you could ask a client is, you can see here, if chronic pain was no longer the reality, what would you do differently?
Yeah.
That's a tough question maybe for some people to answer.
Yeah, that's a heavy one. And sometimes clients just need time to process. But let me share the follow-up with the one client with back pain. After I found out that he wasn't able to dance with his daughter, at her high school graduation, which was in the past, I asked him this question. I said, if chronic pain was no longer your reality, what would you do differently? And this time, the smile returned to his face, and he had, he sat up straight, and he had the answer almost right away. And he said, I'd ask my daughter to dance at her upcoming college graduation. So, again, he now has clarity and understanding of where he wants to go, what he wants to move towards. Yes, pain is still there, but the H word, hope, right? Hope has now returned to his script that is put forth into the future.
So with the return of hope, really what we're talking about, and if you are a health coach with ACE, if you're a certified health coach, you've probably heard this before, we want to be eliciting change talk. And this is really what's happening when we ask questions about what do you want to see in the future? How would your life be different in the future? We're asking the client to think about possibilities rather than obstacles or staying back in that negative story, which would be sustained talk is how we phrase that in our health coaching curriculum. So the other thing I want to mention and maybe talk about a little bit is the individual, the client that you worked with, and how he, over what maybe is a 4-year span of time, was having this chronic pain issue from high school graduation to a college graduation. So how does that length of time really play into understanding how our clients are dealing with pain?
Wow, that's a great question, Jackie. What we have to consider, when pain first shows up, the definition of chronic pain is sustained pain, for 3 months or intermittent for 6. And, this particular individual, it was going on 4 years that they were living with pain. And chronic pain is sneaky. Sometimes it just slowly creeps in and then just becomes bigger and bigger and bigger to the point where people are oftentimes, immobilized and just this fear is running the script. And, having an appreciation that this individual has been experiencing pain for that amount of time, we now have to start to consider, okay, yes, they're talking about back pain, and we have movement assessments that we're well versed in that are going to give us more of their movement profile. But 4 years of experiencing pain, that's the psychosocial realm that we really want to seek to understand.
Right. So in talking and moving into the third question is, how would your life be different if chronic pain were no longer there? We talked about that. And so the third question is, what would life be like without chronic pain? And would you say that for many people who maybe like your other client that have experienced it for 4 years, is that something that they have to think about a little bit? Because maybe things have become just so normal that I don't know what that would be like.
Right, it almost becomes their new norm.
Right.
Yeah. And my colleague Anthony talks about a funnel. A funnel where, if this is, pain-free living, you go golfing, you play hockey, you do all the things that you want to do. But as pain creeps in, the activities that you enjoy or the areas in life that you like to partake in, some of them slowly go away because pain just slowly creeps in to the point where you're down at the bottom of that funnel. And getting out of bed is sometimes a chore and can be very painful. So it's something that, we want to understand and appreciate that this isn't something that's brand new. And sometimes an individual, we need to give them space to ponder. I haven't even thought about looking forward into the future. And giving them space so that they can do that, giving permission for them to do that.
Right, so understanding what that would mean to them. How important is understanding that meaning around what a different life would be like without chronic pain?
Yeah, so again, it comes back, so much comes back to meaning. Everybody in pain has, whether they know it or not, have given a label of meaning to their experience. And sometimes you can just ask them. You don't have to beat around the bush, so you can ask them, what would a life without chronic pain mean to you? And we'll just use the individual again, my client with low back pain, and he said, I wouldn't be living in fear. I'm constantly focused on, is this gonna hurt? Can I do this? He wanted to get back to living a life that was free to move. And understanding that meaning equals movement is everything. And sometimes you can just be direct and say, what would life without pain mean to you? So the freedom of movement was everything to him. And it always comes down to what's most important to the client. We might think to ourselves, I really want to improve that individual's, internal hip rotation, or, they're overpronating, excessively. If we can improve that, we get excited because we're movement geeks. But that might not have any meaning to the individual you're working with. So finding out what would be meaningful that's the psychosocial, that's where the meaning is, and that's the importance.
Right. So you mentioned that, a lot of us are movement geeks, and that's what we want to focus on. And maybe as you're working with your clients, you are, going through the assessments and screenings and understanding where movement compensations are being made and where pain is present. But that's success maybe to us.
Right.
What you're saying is we need to understand what success in working with us as a trainer or a movement specialist, what does that mean to the client?
Exactly.
So that's the fourth question, right, of the core four, and you can see that on your slide now. How will you know that you and I working together has been a success? So that's what we want to ask the client, right?
Yep. And let me just finish the story of my client with back pain. So we have a background, we're starting to shape the foreground, we understand, meaning and movement. So I asked him, how will you know that you and I working together has been a success? I don't want to assume anything. I want to know what success defined by that individual is. And he said, when I asked him that question, he said, I've just shed light into my daughter. I also have another child, and it's my son. And he wants to go snowboarding. And I haven't been able to go because of my back pain. This is what he was saying. And he said, I would know that you and I working together has been a success. Yes, dancing with my daughter, but also being able to take my son snowboarding. And again, that lies outside of the biomechanical realm. That holds meaning and importance to him, being a part of his son's snowboarding experience, rather than just a bystander on the sidelines.
Right. So these 4 questions, as we've said, maybe not something that you need to ask in any particular order.
Yeah, good point.
Is this something that you would be talking to the clients about right away in your kind of initial consultation with them, or how do you introduce these questions?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of these are heavy hitters. They can be, emotionally stimulating for people. So, I don't sit a client down and my first question out my mouth is, one of the core 4. You want to take some time and nurture a relationship and go about establishing trust and rapport. And then at some point, use one of the core 4. I don't use all of them every single time with my clients. If I know that I'm going to be working with someone for, an extended period of time, I might only ask one of them the first time that I meet them. But if I know that this is it, they're only coming for this one assessment, I might use all 4. But also knowing that it's not this one and then this one, then I ask this one. Working with an individual is a fluid process. It's a dynamic process, and every single interaction is different. And give yourself permission to try these, but also to stumble with them and fumble with them. See if you can get to know them and tweak them if you want to, make them your own. But these in their design put the focus on the client, which again, that is the most important thing that we can do, which is seek to understand their world. Right.
So we're going to kind of wrap this up in a nice bow on top.
Sure.
So talk us through kind of those 4 areas that we went over today, and how this is incorporated into the Yellow Brick Road, which we'll talk about in a second too.
Sure. Yeah, so the Yellow Brick Road is a 4-part framework. And we were purposeful in using the word framework because we want this to be something that is added into what you're already doing really well. It's not, you have to relinquish things that you already understand to do this. These are the conversations that we have with clients before we begin our movement assessment or exercise component of working with them. So, we talked a little bit about part 1 of the framework, which is, needs psychology, and that every human being has needs. And more importantly, that when chronic pain is present, the vehicles that they use to meet those needs often are no longer available to them. Part 2 of the framework is about the biopsychosocial model, which we discussed. Just recognizing that every single pain experience has 3 dimensions. Yes, it has biomechanical and biological components to it, and it's important to understand those things. But knowing that there's areas outside of that, psychological and social and environmental. Part 3 revolves around relationship building. If you look at all of the schools of thought in the counseling and psychology realm, there's over 400 different perspectives or schools of thought that you can look through. But what's interesting is in all of the psychology and counseling literature, the most important indicator of a successful intervention or interaction with a client revolves around relationship. The relationship that's established between the coach and the client. And that's what part 3 is about, is relationship building. And recognizing that at the center of all relationships is trust and rapport. So if you picture a flower, so the middle of the flower, the nectar, and then there's 2 petals on the top and 2 petals on the bottom. At the center of that flower, in relationships, is trust and rapport. And that's the first of 5 dimensions that we go through in relationship building. So dimension number 1 is trust and rapport. How do you go about establishing trust and rapport? That's dimensions 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then finally, part 4 of the framework is rewriting the script. And we spent some time talking about the 4 chapters of education, language, metaphors, and a specific type of questioning or reflexive questions, which are designed to put the emphasis forward, right, into possibilities where the intention behind everything is to collaboratively help clients reauthor their story so that, as I mentioned, it's about possibilities moving forward.
Great. So we are going to be looking at some of the references here.
Yes.
And I want to take some time to move into these references. I'll leave them up for just a moment here. Remember, if you would like to purchase this course, these references will be made available to you, but we'll scroll through here just to allow for some visuals on these references. A lot of great resources went into this course as well as into the Yellow Brick Road. And I know that, Kevin, you have a couple of them, and one in particular that is something really important that you want to share, one of the books that you referenced here today. So anything else you want to share about those references?
Yeah, I get asked often about stories. Where do you get your stories from? And a lot of them come from just over the years of working with clients in pain. But you don't have to have years of experience to utilize stories as a tool for education and relating to clients. Again, with the intention of enhancing understanding, expanding meaning. And if I was to recommend a book that relates to the chronic pain demographic, that revolves around the stories that you can use, is Lorimer Mosley's Painful Yarns. It's a fabulous resource to scaffold into, I can take some of these and utilize them with my clients. I don't actually have to go through having a huge, robust repertoire of working with clients for decades and decades and decades. You can learn through this book stories that you can implement with your clients. I couldn't recommend it enough.
Great. So once again, references available if you would like them when you purchase the course. Kevin, thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure.
We are going to be taking some questions here. So
Great.
I can see that people are typing their questions in. If you have a question for Kevin, we'll be taking that here shortly. So please make sure and type that into your YouTube viewer. And in the meantime, would you be able to share some of your contact information so that we can contact you?
For sure.
So you can see the contact information there on the slide if you would like to reach out to Kevin or would like to learn more about his work with clients in chronic pain. Also, if you would like to receive some more information on this particular topic, once again, we've mentioned the course, Yellow Brick Road, that we have now with the American Council on Exercise and Kevin. So if you would like to receive that, you can purchase that on our website. Also, the course that you mentioned previously with Anthony Carey, our pain-free movement specialist, as well as behavior change specialist. So those 3 courses kind of put all of this together, right, in helping our clients deal with chronic pain and moving forward with their process of healthy lifestyle and more healthy living, right, all together. Once again, the CEC Club is available now. So if you are interested in receiving continuing education and would like to do that on an ongoing basis, you can purchase the CEC Club and you get unlimited CECs. So more information is available on our acefitness.org website around the CEC Club. And we will be taking questions here. So let's take a look at some of those questions. I know that a few came in about the Core 4. And so I want to ask Bella's question. I think it's Bella. Thank you for typing in your question. So they're saying that the Core 4 seems to be placing a little bit of a burden on clients to relive and retell their chronic pain experience, which might be exhausting. right? If a client has to kind of retell this, maybe what are some ways as a health and fitness professional, as a provider, that we can empower them and let them, we need to understand their chronic pain experience, right? But how do we navigate that without it being an exhausting experience? Oh, I'm telling this again over and over.
That's a great question. And obviously we don't want to, have a re-traumatization of anything, but I think how I would answer that question is, how I go about it is I like to ask permission. I'm going to ask you some questions, and some of them might be a little bit too heavy, or ones that you might not want to answer. And I want you to know that that is totally 100% okay, and it's in your ball court. So this is obviously me speaking to a client. If I ask you a question that you are uncomfortable in answering, please know that what's most important to me is that this environment feels safe to you. So in no way do I ever force a question on anybody. I'll ask permission and let them know that if they don't want to answer it, they don't have to answer it.
That's great.
Yeah.
So again, allowing them to have that opportunity.
Yes.
But then developing trust to let them know kind of where they're comfortable, right? Yeah. So another question that's coming in is around some conditions that may include chronic pain, but maybe not are biomechanical in nature. So maybe incurable chronic pain issues, maybe fibromyalgia, things like that. What's your take on working with clients who have chronic pain, but it's not a biomechanical sort of situation?
Yeah, boy, again, that's another good question, and an important distinction too. Obviously we want to look at an individual's movement and see the quality of it, and can we enhance the quality of their movement? That's obviously one component. But again, it just comes down to, yes, this individual, has fibromyalgia in this example, but what do they want it to, what do they want their focus in their life to be about moving forward? Can we help them? Again, it's a co-constructive process. When you're talking about, the consultation phase or coaching, you're on par with the individual. It's not you, the expert, and the individual down here. Can you create a collaborative environment where you can help them in them scripting what they want to move towards, even within understanding that they have fibromyalgia? So, I might ask a question, this is just off the top of my head. So in knowing that fibromyalgia is a part of your life right now, what do you think might be, really important to understand that with fibromyalgia, this is still going to be a really important aspect of what is meaningful to me in my life? Again, can we enhance their understanding of their experience? Even if it's fibromyalgia and very little biomechanical. Can we enhance their understanding, expand the meaning that they've given it? Maybe their meaning was, I have fibromyalgia, I can never go for walks again. Can we expand that? That's kind of the challenge and the art behind working with individuals.
Right, and challenge is a great word because no two clients that we see are the same.
Exactly.
As you mentioned.
Right.
So as you mentioned too, there's no one script to follow. The core four are kind of some guidelines or a framework of ways that you can introduce this conversation to your client and learn more about what's important to them, right?
That's exactly it. The core four, what can we learn about them? It's again just trying to seek to understand their world. So that eventually, hopefully, together we can create a script that has meaning for them. And if they don't want to answer a question, let them know that's okay. That's okay. The most important thing is that the environment you create together, there's safety for them.
Right, and something that you mentioned earlier when we were talking previously is about the relationship between client and trainer or coach or whatever your role is, and how important that relationship is in the success of the client.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the key.
Yeah, can you in some way relate to each other within a relationship? And that happens in the conversations that we have. And even before, so from the moment your client walks through, your studio, your fitness facility, your office, until right before you begin, the movement analysis or exercise program. Can you foster an environment that is conducive to establishing a meaningful relationship with clients, with all clients, not just clients in pain, but with all clients?
Great.
Yeah.
So we have other questions that are coming in. We're not going to be able to get to all of them today,
Okay.
But if you would like to answer a few more questions on our ACE Fitness Facebook page,
I can do that.
We can post up a chat there. If you would like to continue the conversation with Kevin Murray and discuss how to work with clients with chronic pain, make sure that you chat onto our Facebook page, and he'll be answering questions there over the next day or so as well. So once again, if you would like to receive CECs for today's presentation, you can follow the video that is provided on your screen, and that will take you to our live and recorded webinars page, where there will be a recorded version of this course available in the next 24 to 48 hours. Once you receive that within your MyAce account after purchase, you can take the quiz, and when you pass the quiz, you'll receive 0.1 CECs within your MyAce account. And you can continue your education next month with us, and we'll also be talking a little bit on the health coaching side, the behavior change side, but this time with an emphasis on weight management. And we will be talking with Dominique Adair, who is a member of our scientific advisory panel, and she's a registered dietitian to talk to us about how to help our clients change their behaviors to change their life. So once again, Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great.
If you have any other questions or want to comment about today's webinar, please make sure you connect with ACE, a variety of ways that you can see on your screen: LinkedIn, YouTube, Pinterest, Facebook, and Instagram. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's get people moving.